Bruce Lee all the time, and I think Bruce Lee was...
You challenge me here? I do. Then show me your skill.
As you wish.
Los Angeles, 1972. The city is electric. Hollywood is obsessed with martial arts. Studios are scrambling to copy a formula they barely understand.
Focus. Your stance is weak. Yes, Sifu. Again!
To this day, much better than me.
Theaters are packed. Young men are shadowboxing in parking lots after watching late-night screenings. And above all of it stands one name. Bruce Lee. He's 32 years old. Lean, explosive, precise. At his physical peak. After the success of The Big Boss and Fist of Fury, Bruce isn't just a rising star. He's becoming a global phenomenon. His speed looks unreal on camera. His philosophy challenges centuries of martial arts tradition. He isn't following styles anymore. He's dismantling them. To many, Bruce Lee is untouchable. But across town, in a much smaller dojo in Orange County, a 21-year-old instructor is telling a very different story. His name is Steven Seagal. At this point, he's unknown outside small martial arts circles. No films, no fame, no headlines. Just a young Aikido teacher with sharp confidence and an even sharper mouth. Seagal tells students and acquaintances that Aikido represents real martial arts. He suggests that Kung Fu, Bruce's foundation, lacks structure. He implies that Bruce's approach is flashy, not complete. And then he says something that changes everything. He says he could teach Bruce Lee, not train with him, not exchange ideas. Teach him. In the tight-knit martial arts community of 1970s Los Angeles, words move fast. Instructors talk. Students gossip. Claims travel. Eventually, the message reaches Bruce Lee, not as rumor, not as speculation, but as a direct challenge to his credibility. Bruce doesn't brush it off. He doesn't joke about it. He doesn't ignore it. He reportedly says just a few words. Bring him to me. No press. No public announcement. No audience. Just a private confrontation arranged quietly. Two very different men. Two very different levels of reputation. One room. What happens when a 21-year-old instructor challenges the most feared martial artist in the world? By 1972, Bruce Lee is no longer just a martial artist. He's a symbol. After the explosive success of The Big Boss, audiences across Asia see something they've never seen before. A leading man who moves with real speed, real power, real intent. The film doesn't just succeed. It erupts. Then comes Fist of Fury. This time, it's not just about box office numbers. It's about dominance. Bruce's screen presence becomes undeniable. His timing is surgical. His intensity feels dangerous. He doesn't look like he's acting. He looks like he's barely holding back. And soon, Enter the Dragon will carry him into global superstardom, making him a permanent icon in Western cinema as well. But even before that release, Bruce's name is already circulating internationally. Hollywood producers are watching. Fighters are studying him. Critics are debating him. But the films are only half the story. Bruce Lee is obsessed with combat truth. Behind the scenes, he spends hours testing techniques, cross-training, sparring with practitioners of different systems. He questions everything. He rejects blind tradition. He challenges masters who cling to rigid forms. From that obsession, he develops Jeet Kune, not as a style, but as a rejection of styles. He calls styles organized despair. He says forms create illusion. He believes techniques must work under pressure, or they mean nothing. To Bruce, martial arts isn't performance. It's efficiency, directness, interception. He doesn't tolerate fantasy. If someone claims something works, Bruce wants to see it, feel it, pressure test it. He's built his entire reputation on authenticity, on speed that cameras can't fully capture, on power that trained fighters respect. So when word reaches him that a 21-year-old instructor is telling people he could teach Bruce Lee real martial arts, it's not just arrogance. It's a direct challenge to everything Bruce stands for. Not because Bruce is insecure, not because he fears competition, but because he despises illusion. Bruce has seen instructors hide behind tradition. He's seen men claim mastery without ever stepping outside rehearsed movements. He's dismantled rigid stylists in private training sessions before. And now, a young Aikido instructor is publicly suggesting Bruce's approach lacks depth. Aikido, a system built on redirection, balance, joint control, is being positioned as superior to Bruce's stripped-down, explosive combat philosophy. To Bruce, that's not a minor disagreement. It's philosophical opposition. He believes combat must be adaptable, that rigidity is weakness, that titles mean nothing. So when someone uses titles and lineage to elevate themselves above tested skill, Bruce reacts. He doesn't respond through interviews. He doesn't argue in public. He prefers something simpler. Verification. Because in his world, reputation isn't defended with words. It's defended with demonstration. The BY 1972, Bruce Lee isn't just protecting pride. He's protecting principle. And that's what makes this moment dangerous. This isn't about celebrity. This is about credibility.
You think you start smart me? I don't think. I know. Won't prove it. With pleasure.
If someone claims superiority over the most tested martial artist of his era, shouldn't that claim be proven face to face? In 1972, Steven Seagal is not a movie star. There are no red carpets, no blockbuster premieres, no Hollywood contracts. That chapter won't begin until years later with films like Above the Law and Under Siege, where he'll be introduced as a calm, unshakable force, a man who barely moves yet somehow defeats everyone in the room. But in 1972, none of that exists. Right now, he runs a small dojo in Orange County. No cameras, no fame, just a training mat, a handful of students, and a growing reputation built almost entirely through word of mouth. Seagal presents himself as something rare. He tells students he moved to Japan as a teenager, that he immersed himself in traditional martial arts culture, that he trained intensely in Aikido under respected masters, that he became the first foreigner to operate a dojo in Japan, an achievement that, if true, would be historic. To new students, the story sounds impressive, exotic, credible. Japan, lineage, discipline. These details carry weight in martial arts circles, especially in the early 1970s, when access to authentic Eastern training is limited and mystique adds authority. Some people accept his background without hesitation. Others quietly question it. Records are harder to verify in that era. Stories travel by conversation, not databases. Credentials are repeated until they become fact, or at least accepted fact. But whether every detail is precise or not, one thing is clear. Seagal believes in his own narrative. He carries himself with calm certainty. He speaks as if hierarchy is already settled. He doesn't sound like a student climbing the ladder. He sounds like a master defending a position. And that confidence draws people in. Charisma is powerful in a dojo environment. Students look for certainty. They look for someone who appears unshakable. Seagal projects that image effortlessly. He rarely appears unsure. He rarely hedges his statements. He speaks in absolutes. And then he makes the statement that changes everything. He suggests that Aikido represents a deeper truth than the flashy striking arts gaining popularity in film. He implies that Kung Fu, the system most associated with Bruce Lee, is incomplete. And eventually, he says something even more direct. He claims he could teach Bruce Lee, not train with him, not exchange philosophies. Teach him. In the close-knit martial arts communities of Southern California, statements like that don't stay local for long. Instructors know each other. Students cross-train. Names circulate quickly, especially when one of those names is Bruce Lee. Seagal may have been young. He may have been relatively unknown. But he understood something important. Bold claims create gravity. They force attention. They force response. And in 1972, there is no bigger gravitational center in martial arts than Bruce Lee. Eventually, the message reaches him. Not filtered, not softened. Direct. Whatever his intention, one thing is certain. The claim did exactly what bold claims are designed to do. It reached the very man it was about.
Atta!
Did Seagal truly believe he was superior, or did he underestimate the weight of the name he was challenging? No one agrees on the exact moment it reached him. Some say it started casually, a student mentioning that a young Aikido instructor had been talking. Others claim the rumor traveled through shared contacts in the Los Angeles martial arts scene, where instructors visited each other's schools, observed training, and quietly compared reputations. In 1972, that community was small, tight, competitive. Names carried weight. So did criticism. And eventually, the message arrived intact. A 21-year-old instructor in Orange County was telling people that Bruce Lee's approach lacked depth, that Aikido represented a more complete form of combat, that Bruce's methods were impressive but not complete, that he, if given the opportunity, could teach Bruce something real. There was no confusion about what that meant. It wasn't a philosophical debate. It wasn't academic theory. It was a challenge wrapped in calm language. Bruce Lee had spent years dismantling rigid systems. He had openly criticized traditional martial arts schools for clinging to form over function. He questioned masters who hid behind lineage instead of sparring. He believed in pressure testing everything. So when someone positioned themselves as more complete, without ever stepping into his training circle, it struck a nerve. Not because Bruce feared being tested, but because he believed that bold claims required proof. Witnesses who later described Bruce's reaction say it was immediate, focused, direct. He didn't rant. He didn't mock. He didn't laugh it off. He gave a simple instruction. Bring him to me. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. If someone believed their art was superior, Bruce would examine it personally. No publicity. No promotion. No spectacle. Just a private meeting arranged quietly between men who understood what that meant. In Bruce's world, reputation was validated through contact, not conversation. If you claimed effectiveness, you demonstrated it. If you claimed superiority, you proved it. The request was delivered, and arrangements were made. There would be no cameras in the room, no reporters outside the door, no official record, just two martial artists, two philosophies, two reputations. But even though the meeting was intended to remain private, something about it guaranteed it wouldn't stay that way. Because when a global icon responds to a young challenger, the story doesn't disappear. It grows, quietly at first, then steadily. And once it begins to circulate, it becomes impossible to contain. The meeting happens quietly. No public announcement, no press statement, no staged demonstration, just a private room in Los Angeles. A handful of witnesses, and two very different reputations walking into the same space. This is where history splits. According to several accounts that surfaced years later, the encounter is short. Not a full sparring match. Not a dramatic fight. More of a test. Bruce Lee steps forward first. He doesn't posture. He doesn't perform. He examines. Witnesses claim Bruce tested Seagal's structure. Light contact, quick pressure, probing balance. He allegedly moved in sharply, intercepting space before Seagal could establish control. Fast hand positioning, sudden shifts in angle, the kind of movement Bruce was known for. Some say Seagal attempted to apply an Aikido technique, redirecting force, searching for leverage, but Bruce's speed disrupted the setup before it could fully form. Others describe Bruce demonstrating trapping and close-range control, closing distance so quickly that the exchange felt over before it began. There are accounts that the entire interaction lasted only seconds. Controlled, technical, decisive, not a brawl, not a knockout, but clear enough that the hierarchy in the room became obvious. Witnesses later described Seagal as young, composed, but visibly surprised by Bruce's explosiveness. Not humiliated, but clearly outmatched in tempo and adaptability. Yet that is only one side of the story. Years later, Seagal offers a different tone. In interviews, he speaks of mutual respect, of exchange, of discussion rather than domination. He suggests the meeting was technical, not competitive, a sharing of knowledge between martial artists. In his telling, There is no embarrassment, no imbalance, no dramatic shift in energy. Just two practitioners interacting professionally. Two narratives. One room. No footage. No official documentation. Only memory. And memory shifts with time. What makes this moment powerful isn't just what allegedly happened inside that room. It's what happened afterward. Bruce Lee never publicly mentioned it. Not in interviews. Not in writings. Not in private notes that have surfaced. Seagal, however, would revisit the story decades later. Carefully, selectively, always with nuance. The witnesses who lean toward Bruce's dominance insist the encounter was brief and revealing. Seagal's version leans toward diplomacy and technical exchange. Some accounts emphasize speed and control. Others emphasize conversation and respect. The absence of video means there is no definitive visual proof. Only testimonies from individuals who were present and recollections shaped by time, loyalty, and reputation. The truth may lie somewhere between extremes. Or it may not. But one thing is certain. That private meeting, intended to remain quiet, became one of the most debated stories in martial arts circles. So why do so many witnesses describe it completely differently from Seagal's version? After the meeting, something unexpected happens. Nothing. No interviews. No public statements. No references. Bruce Lee never publicly mentions the incident. Not in interviews. Not in writing. Not to the press. And that silence stands out. Because Bruce Lee was not a quiet man when it came to martial arts philosophy. He was outspoken, direct, unfiltered. If he believed something was ineffective, he said it openly. If he respected someone's skill, he acknowledged it. If he disagreed with a system, he explained why. He debated traditional masters. He criticized rigid styles. He challenged long-held assumptions in public. Bruce did not avoid confrontation, especially intellectual confrontation. So when it comes to this encounter, his silence becomes part of the story. Those close to him say Bruce rarely dwelled on things he didn't consider important. His focus was forward. Training, filming, evolving, refining Jeet Kune. He wasn't interested in collecting small victories or revisiting minor exchanges. If an interaction didn't change his path, it likely didn't earn his attention. But others interpret the silence differently. They argue that if the meeting had been truly competitive, Bruce would have addressed it. If it had been significant, he might have clarified it. Bruce was not afraid to speak about challenges, especially when they reinforced his philosophy. Instead, there is nothing. No confirmation. No denial. No acknowledgement. And that absence creates space. Space for interpretation. Space for speculation. Space for competing narratives to grow over time. Meanwhile, Steven Seagal would go on to build his own career years later, and the story of the meeting would occasionally resurface, shaped differently depending on who told it. Bruce, however, would never revisit it. He died in 1973, just a year later. His legacy froze in time, defined by his films, his philosophy, and his documented demonstrations of speed and innovation. The meeting, whatever it truly was, remained unofficial, which leads to the uncomfortable reality. When one side never speaks, the narrative eventually belongs to whoever does. Some believe the encounter was too insignificant for Bruce to remember. Others believe it simply didn't rise to the level of importance in his mind. To him, it may have been just another technical exchange in a life filled with them. But silence always invites interpretation. Was the encounter too insignificant to mention? In 1973, Bruce Lee dies suddenly. He's 32 years old. His career is still ascending. His philosophy still evolving. His influence still expanding. But death freezes his image in perfection. There are no decline years. No public failures. No fading relevance. His legend becomes untouchable. Posters go up. Documentaries are made. His training methods are studied like scripture. Bruce Lee becomes myth, and myths don't defend themselves. Years pass. Then, in 1988, Steven Seagal explodes into Hollywood with Above the Law. By the early 1990s, with Under Siege, he's positioned as something different from other action stars. He doesn't move like Bruce. He doesn't kick like Bruce. He doesn't display explosive speed. Instead, he's marketed as controlled, minimal, effortless. a man who barely raises his voice while dismantling opponents. Calm, efficient, invincible, and with fame comes interviews. In various conversations over the years, Seagal references Bruce Lee. Sometimes the tone is respectful. Sometimes it's vague. Sometimes it carries subtle suggestion, as if the two once stood on equal ground. He speaks carefully, never directly diminishing Bruce, never outright claiming victory, but shaping the memory. That's when critics begin digging. Former students step forward. Old training partners compare notes. Martial arts historians start examining timelines. When Seagal was in Japan, who he trained under, what ranks he held, how long he stayed. Some details hold up. Others don't align perfectly. Stories that once sounded clean begin to look layered. Dates overlap. Credentials appear disputed. Witnesses offer different recollections. And slowly, a pattern forms. A pattern of bold narratives, of grand positioning, of stories that grow sharper in hindsight. None of it proves deception outright, but it fuels doubt. Because when someone builds an identity around mystique, every inconsistency becomes magnified. The 1972 meeting resurfaces in that context. Now it isn't just a quiet dojo encounter. It's part of a larger conversation about credibility. If the meeting was insignificant, why mention it later at all? If it was equal, why do multiple witnesses remember imbalance? If it was respectful and technical, why do descriptions vary so widely? As Seagal's fame rises, so does scrutiny. And in that scrutiny, the old story gains new weight. Not because it was filmed, not because it was officially documented, but because it intersects two reputations, one frozen in legend, the other actively evolving. And in the space between those reputations, memory becomes powerful. Over the years, several martial artists who trained, competed, or moved in the same circles as both men have shared their recollections. Their memories, while sometimes fragmented, offer a glimpse into what might have happened in that small dojo decades earlier. Most versions lean in one direction. Bruce Lee was dominant. He moved with precision, fast, explosive, calculated. Every strike, every step seemed intentional, almost inevitable. Observers describe him as unmatched, a force that left an impression on everyone present. Even in a brief encounter, his skill and timing were impossible to ignore. Steven Seagal, at 21, was there as well. Talented, yes. Charismatic, yes. But nowhere near Bruce's level. Witnesses recall him attempting techniques, trying to redirect Bruce's energy, testing his own balance against the legend. But Bruce's reactions were immediate, flawless. Seagal reportedly struggled to keep pace, to find openings in the way only someone with years of top-level experience could recognize. The encounter, according to these witnesses, was decisive, clear enough that it left a mark. Seagal may have refrained from repeating bold claims publicly after that. At least for a while, he let the story lie dormant. It wasn't humility. Perhaps it was recognition. Perhaps it was understanding that actions speak louder than words. And yet, decades later, the story shifts. When Seagal's fame rises in the late 80s and early 90s, interviews and anecdotes paint a slightly different picture. The tone changes. Stories soften. Details blur. What was once described as an unmistakable test of skill becomes a narrative of mutual respect. A room where dominance was clear becomes a place of polite exchange. Memory, it seems, becomes convenient. Some witnesses suggest this isn't necessarily intentional deceit. Memory is fragile. Time filters perception. Legends grow in ways that alter recollection. Bruce's speed and mastery may have overshadowed details that seemed critical at the moment, while Seagal's own career success reshaped his personal narrative. Others interpret it differently. They see selective storytelling, subtle exaggeration, and careful shaping of history. The meeting, once a private test of skill, slowly becomes part of a larger mythology surrounding both men. Bruce Lee remains untouchable in legend. Seagal grows into the image of a calm, unstoppable action hero. The contrast amplifies every retelling. Yet the witnesses remain critical. They remind us that, at the core, the original encounter mattered in its simplicity. One young, confident instructor facing the world's most explosive martial artist, in a room with no cameras, no record, and no official outcome. The variations in memory, the shifts in tone, and the decades-long reinterpretation reveal something deeper than the fight itself. How legends are remembered, how claims are revisited, and how stories adapt to the fame of those involved. There is no video, no official transcript, no recorded commentary from that day, just testimony, fragmented, conflicting, shaped by memory and perspective. And yet, in the midst of uncertainty, a few things stand out. In 1972, Bruce Lee was not just an athlete or an actor. He was redefining what combat could be. Speed, power, precision, adaptability, all honed to a degree that few had ever experienced. He questioned tradition. He rejected empty ritual. He tested techniques relentlessly. Every motion had meaning. Every claim had to survive scrutiny. Across from him, 21-year-old Steven Seagal was building a reputation. Ambitious, confident, charismatic, bold in claims that demanded attention. He spoke of training in Japan, mastery of Aikido, and skills that could challenge even the best. At that moment, his story was still in the making, and proven, untested against the highest standard. Two paths, two philosophies, two ambitions. Bruce Lee never needed to defend his status. His reputation was already cemented in skill, in film, and in the growing whispers of martial artists worldwide. Demonstration was enough. Proof was unnecessary. It was inherent. Steven Seagal, on the other hand, was constructing a narrative. Every claim, every anecdote, every bold assertion contributed to a legend he hoped to build. Success, recognition, and authority all depended on the perception of his skill. In a quiet room in Los Angeles, those two ambitions briefly collided. There were no cameras, no audience, no record except what those present remembered. One man tested, the other claimed. One man observed, the other performed. And for a fleeting moment, the disparity between legend and aspiration became clear. The room held more than martial technique. It held ego, reputation, and philosophy. Bruce Lee represented authenticity and mastery. Seagal represented potential and projection. The encounter itself, brief, private, and undocumented, became a pivot point not for the participants, but for history itself. Time has only deepened the mystery. Accounts conflict. Stories diverge. Witnesses remember differently. Seagal's later narratives soften the sharp edges. Bruce's silence amplifies them. What remains is a collision of worlds, a study in ambition, myth, and the fragile nature of memory. Bruce Lee's legacy is built on undeniable foundations. Speed that cameras struggle to capture. Innovations in combat philosophy that dismantled traditional martial arts orthodoxy. A cultural impact that transcended film, influencing generations of martial artists and performers around the world. Every movement, every punch, every kick contributed to a lasting mythos, one grounded in reality, skill, and relentless refinement. Steven Seagal's legacy, by contrast, exists in a different dimension. It blends real martial arts expertise with cinematic interpretation, film choreography, controlled mystique, and the careful curation of a narrative-shaped public perception. Seagal's story is as much about image as it is about skill, the aura of invincibility carefully constructed over decades. One man became immortal at 32, his legend frozen in time. The world remembers Bruce Lee not just for what he did on film or in training halls, but for what he represented, a standard that could not be easily surpassed, a reality in martial arts that demanded truth over showmanship. The other spent decades navigating a different path, a path filled with praise and criticism, belief and skepticism, respect and doubt. Seagal's rise to prominence was never solely about technique. It was about cultivating perception, controlling the story, and shaping his own mythos. And then there's the encounter in 1972, brief, private, undocumented. The meeting may never be fully proven. No footage survives. Memories conflict. Witnesses disagree. Yet the fascination remains. Because it wasn't just a test of technique. It was a test of status, of ego, of reputation. A single room held the collision of two very different worlds. Bruce Lee, absolute in skill, minimal in words, unyielding in philosophy. Steven Seagal, ambitious, confident, projecting mastery, seeking recognition and legitimacy. The tension wasn't in strikes or throws alone. It was in what each represented. One tested reality. One built mythology. In martial arts, claims are cheap. Words can be repeated endlessly, embellished, or forgotten. Status can be fabricated with confidence, charisma, and narrative. But the true measure comes when those claims are confronted. When technique meets skill. When reputation meets reality. That 1972 encounter, whether brief, decisive, or ambiguous, captures that dynamic perfectly. It reminds us that legends aren't just created by talent. They're reinforced by verification, by confrontation, by the ability to back claims with undeniable truth. And it explains why the story continues to captivate decades later. Because it sits at the intersection of fact and narrative, skill and myth, youth and mastery, ambition and legend. Because in martial arts, claims mean nothing until they're tested.